Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome. I'm Rob Doherty, and this is the Festivus Podcast Executive Edition, supported by Liberry Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, the animation consultant for Film London. In this podcast series, we'll be chatting to the movers and the shakers in the animation industry, and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and I hope get to meet the person behind that executive title. A quick request. If you're enjoying this podcast series with Festivus, then we would love it if you would rate and subscribe, and if you so wish, share with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to check the back catalogue, where we speak to the likes of Kelsey Mann, Alex Wiseman, Philippe Alessandri, and many more top kids industry executives. Thank you. From a degree in Automotive and Industrial Design at Coventry University to co-founding DNEG and now VFX Supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic in London, the career path of Hayden Jone is nothing if not eclectic. Maybe Julian can find out a little more about how Hayden got started, what inspired him, and what's next.
Hayden, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Really good. Thanks for having me.
That's a pleasure. Now, you are VFX Supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic in London. In fact, you are a Primetime Emmy and BAFTA award-winning visual effects supervisor, recently working on Netflix's Lost Ollie, a live-action animation hybrid family series, which was directed by Peter Ramsey, and the Netflix animated feature Ultraman Rising. Having looked at your credit list over the last 25 years, it's extensive and impressive, covering features, TV series, pretty much a roll call of all the great shows. But let's wind back a little bit to the beginning. Where was home when you were growing up? Were there any family influences, films, series that sparked an interest in VFX or animation?
So I grew up in Wolverhampton in the West Midlands. And even though there were definitely artistic influences in our family. My parents were both teachers, but my mom really had like a spark for art. So there was always a little bit of artistic kind of, endeavors going on around the house. Actually, my dad influenced me as well by buying computers all the time. And in that era as well, a time when computers weren't that common. So, I grew up learning how to code and learning the kind of the real basics of how computers work and how to get kind of very basic programs up and running with them. And it was always interesting to kind of I think even from a very early age, I could see how those two worlds could merge together somehow and really spark a kind of idea of creativity. And then that coupled with, I was a huge sci-fi fan. I was one of the lucky ones. I saw Star Wars in the cinema when I was 5, wow. And I can still remember it to this day. And it was just a really, really kind of great moment to be into that. So I was watching Star Trek on the TV, Star Wars at the cinema, and I would, you'd go out and just absorb yourself in these brand new worlds, which featured all these amazing kind of visual effects, even though I didn't really know what visual effects was at that stage. I just knew it was wild and exciting and something really interesting.
And were you alone in this, or were a bunch of friends that used to go out and see all this stuff together?
Yeah, I mean it was quite nice. It was definitely something I felt like I bonded with my dad with, because he was a huge Blake Seven fan, for anyone who remembers Blake Seven.
I do, yep.
Yeah, and so, we'd sit down on a Saturday night at about 6:00, watch it on BBC One and really, really kind of enjoy having these moments of kind of connection over science fiction storytelling, which was great. And yeah, I mean, all of my friends really grew up on the same influences. So, we all loved cinema. And as we grew and as we grew up, that kind of love of cinema kind of blossomed into all aspects of cinema. I was very, very much more well-rounded when I was kind of heading into school rather than just the sci-fi kind of, edge of the spectrum that I started off with.
And as you travelled, along your education journey, as you got older, and sort of primary school, senior school, etc., did animation or VFX start to figure in your mind at all as a career choice?
No, it was really interesting. I'm often asked that question, and really, it just wasn't. It wasn't something that was available at the time. It didn't feel like it was available. I think Bournemouth had just started their university course as I was, kind of like looking for a university to go to. But because I had a very traditional education, you were very much being forced into traditional jobs. So combining art and science, you were looking at things like architecture. I ended up going into industrial design, which, is a really good kind of like combination of the two. But it's a real shame that at that stage of both the film industry and the educational aspects of visual effects, it just really wasn't very well known around the schools, especially schools in the Midlands. It just didn't seem like that was a job. So you kind of aimed your life in other areas.
And can I be terribly, terribly rude and ask you when that was?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of like, you can see from my grey hair that I'm not a spring chicken, but yeah. So I went to university in 1990. So yeah, so it's kind of quite late.
Oh, this is donut. I went to drama school in 1979. You've got nothing to complain about.
Oh, okay. All right, that's good. That's good.
Then you said you went to the prestigious Coventry University, and as you just said, you studied automotive and industrial design. And you mentioned earlier on that when we were chatting that that's where you learned how to communicate visually. Can you define what communicating visually means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think up until the point that I got onto the university course, obviously I'd done art as part of my kind of senior school education, and you learn the basics of drawing and painting, and maybe you'll get like some of the basic qualities of like how to craft something visually, but really Coventry was the place where I spent 4 years really kind of like constantly drawing, constantly creating not only kind of designs, but images of vehicles. And it wasn't just cars, it was, cars. There were lots of industrial kind of like objects as well. So everything from, kind of hair dryers to computers. And I had a real, I nearly almost lost my career to boat design. I really, really enjoyed the boat design aspect, because I think it was just something about the shapes and the long, sleek curves of a boat that really appealed to me. And I spent 4 years really honing how to communicate my designs visually. What was really needed from a basic sketch all the way through to a final finished polished rendering. And those were skills that really saw me through well on into my later career. Those are skills that I still use today, really. So
interesting. Did you go into VFX straight after uni?
No, I didn't. I mean, I think even then, even though I might have understood that there was a job there by the end of my university course, I think it was still seen as something that was unachievable. And again, I used computers a lot. I'd started using computers to kind of generate 3D art as part of my course, and I kind of like I was in my early 20s, and I played a lot of video games. So there used to be this magazine called The Edge in the UK, and it was like an industry magazine for computer game studios. And in the back, there was always adverts. There were like huge amounts of adverts for artists all the time. And so I think it was the Easter before I graduated. I was kind of thinking, well, life's getting quite serious. I think I'll probably need to actually kind of like think about getting a job. And I have had an industrial operation. I kind of printed out a load of my artwork. I had a lot of envelopes and CVs, copies of my CV. And I applied to, I think it was somewhere around about 30 job adverts,
wow,
like 1 month, and just thought, well, there you go. I've tried. And I was shocked because within a week I'd had 3 interviews and one of the companies had given me a job. So it was literally instantaneous in those days, because there just there wasn't the same level of people the same amount of people with those skills kind of applying. So games companies were really kind of like trying to find as many people as they could to fill this kind of like growing industry that was happening in the UK.
So it all started off in games then?
Yeah. So, I mean, it started off, I mean, I remember my first job in games. They sat me down at a machine, a really expensive, I mean, Silicon graphics machines were used in games. They were incredibly expensive. Like one of those and a license of Softimage, which is what I started on. Yeah, they were like tens of thousands of pounds. I mean, completely out of the reach of anyone normally. And because no one had any experience, the first 2 months were like, here's the manuals, go and learn it. And so, I had a wonderful couple of months, like just literally leafing through the manuals, trying things, playing around with it. And that was great. But actually my first game was on the Super Nintendo. So it was a 2D, 16-bit bitmap graphics game where I had to learn how to animate in my characters were 8 pixels by 16 pixels across, and we had to get character, we had to get, some different, animation moves onto them. And it was a real eye opener for how much creativity you can get when there's limitations on your artwork.
And just, I mean, sort of jumping off piste ever so slightly now. I mean, when you think of what's going on with, animation generally and how the audience has transferred over to social gaming sites like Roblox, that's fairly basic kind of animation too, isn't it? Yet, kids are doing what you said, you did a number of years ago, which is trying to get some character and story and action sequences done with quite limited animation.
Yeah, it's a really amazing. Actually, I often think that quite a large amount of creativity happens when you have that limitation. When you have something where you can't just pour, time and money and, and all the bells and whistles onto it, and you are stripped down into something really bare bones, and that's where ideas and story and pure visual communication come into play. You have to communicate an idea incredibly kind of like, simply so that people can connect with your idea and your story. And it's a really great challenge to have.
And it must have been quite a new thing for you because, with your automotive design background and, boat design and stuff like that, which were all, I'm assuming, fairly static, to then sort of go into something with games where transferring those skills and actually having things moving around and interacting and stuff like that, again, must have been a whole new world for you.
Yeah, completely. And I think it was always really interesting how we were taking these static objects and really kind of like, imbuing animation into them. So, one of the first 3D games that we did, we had to strip down a character into the fewest amount of points possible to make it up. So we had a 72 vertice character, and 72 vertices. If you try and make it, go away, try and make one. If you do 71, you have to lose a hand, or maybe like a roundness in the face, you have to have a slap. So, it was really interesting to have that challenge of how do we get it down to the barest minimum? But then also it wasn't just, it's the barest minimum as a sculpture. It was the barest minimum, but we still have to be able to make it move. We have to be able to, we actually applied motion capture to it. And it's still read as a person, so even though it was really, really stripped down, very, very kind of, reduced poly count, it still had to read as a character, and you still had to get the feeling of a performance out of it.
Oh, wow. And you stayed in game production for a while, didn't you? And I think you said that one of the startups you were involved with gave you a love of Japan. Yeah,
I was really lucky. The first company we had, one of the executives left and picked me and a friend up and moved us to this startup, which was great fun. And we were making games for a Japanese publisher, and I really lucked out and managed to go to Japan for a couple of weeks. We were making Japanese football league games, and I I kind of landed in Japan and literally just toured football stadiums in Japan for 2 weeks.
As you do, yeah.
As you do. But I had a fantastic friend out there who was put in charge of like kind of getting me from place to place, because it's not the easiest thing when you land in Japan. And he was brilliant because he knew of my love for science fiction and art and culture. And so he used to take me around like these amazing bookshops. I mean, I left with like, I think I took like a really tiny suitcase. I left with like kind of like 3 suitcases filled with kind of model kits and books and things that you just couldn't get in the UK, when those days. And, it really sparked my love of all things Japan and Japanese culture and Japanese art. So that was the real magic moment for me.
Excellent. And you stayed in games for a while, but something triggered you to move into VFX, which was a new area for you. New companies, maybe less people that you knew. How did you go about? Well, A, what triggered it, and B, how did you go about making that career change?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think by that stage I knew it was a career, and I knew that the skill set coming from games and even the industrial design background really was quite a good skill set to have to kind of move you into film and TV visual effects. I think it came about because one of my friends who started at the company with me, he was a programmer, and he left and joined Silicon Graphics and made a big move kind of like out to the US. And it really kind of like made me go, do you know what, if he's done an amazing thing. If he can do it, I can do it. So right. I think rather foolishly, I quit my job without anything to go on to.
Oh, like, wow.
Yeah, literally just kind of thought one day, well, this is it. It's kind of like all or nothing. I'm going to have to give it a try. So I saved up and got myself a ticket to LA, went to SIGGRAPH. So paid for myself to go to SIGGRAPH. And again, made sure my portfolio was great. I had all of all my show reel converted into NTSC. Again, like weird things that you don't have to think about nowadays. Nowadays, you just throw it up on Vimeo or YouTube. Those days, I had to search out somebody who would do an NTSC conversion of a VHS, which is crazy. But yeah, so literally landed at SIGGRAPH and spent the entire week going around just talking to people, talking to companies, and really, really kind of like trying to push into visual effects. Actually, a lot of the time, most of the visual effects companies in those days had game kind of companies attached to them. And I was getting a lot of, well, you haven't really got any visual effects experience, but we'd love you for our games arm. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? I kind of done games now, and I'm really, I know that visual effects is really where my heart is and what I want to do. And so I kept saying no, and kept moving on to a different company. And finally, I went to Cinesite, and Cinesite were hiring in this hotel, and they had 2 suites. One was for their LA office and one was for their London office. And it was a really hot day. It had been a punishing week. It had been a hot week. I'm not very good in the heat. And it was a very hot day, and I was like in British clothes, let's put it that way. I wasn't quite in the Californian kind of clothing. And then I had a huge portfolio, and I was like lugging it around. I was thinking, do you know what? Maybe California is not right. And so when I saw the split between Cinesite LA and Cinesite London, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go and have a chat with the London team and take my chances there. And I opened the door, and the guy who interviewed me is a guy called Jonathan Privet, who I still work with to this day, even though we've been through a few different companies now. But yeah, and he also had done car design and had come through that. And so luckily, I still had loads of my car drawings in my portfolio. So I showed that, and he was like, "Oh, that's great, that's fantastic. Come and have a chat with us." When you're back from LA in London. And so we set up a time to go back for a second interview in London. So that was great.
And how did that go?
Not so well. What I didn't realise is there was quite a few people who were after that job. So we had a really good second interview, and I interviewed with the kind of head of the company as well, and it really, really kind of excited me, like having this chance to actually be there, talk to some of the artists as well, and really understand what the job was. It locked me in. I was like, I think at that stage, after that second interview, I was like, visual effects is for me. And then to my horror, I get this kind of thank you, but no thank you email, from Cinesight saying, like, do you know what? Unfortunately we're going to pass on, this time. But thanks for coming to see us. And I was a little bit heartbroken after kind of winding myself up to it.
But I mean, so they said no. How did you take that rejection? I mean, you was disappointed, obviously. What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I was always kind of like brought up to is like to kind of say thanks. And so I thought, do you know what? It was maybe a risk for them, and I'll just phone them up. I'll phone up Jonathan and just say, look, do you know what? Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And look, if there's any roles coming up, please do think of me first. And, if there's something I can do to kind of like make my portfolio better, then please do let me know. And, we had a great chat, and he was like, oh, don't worry. Your portfolio is great. And then he said, well, actually, we had this job come in a couple of days ago, and I think it's probably a perfect fit for you and for your skill set. And would you, how quickly could you move down to London? And I was like, even though I was kind of living back in the Midlands at that point, I was like, I could be there, tomorrow or like the day after tomorrow. And so I think the week later, I moved down. I was living on a friend's sofa, and that started my job at Cinesight.
And what was that job?
So I was hired as a 3D artist. So we were kind of like we were making versions. It was for a version of Thunderbirds that never actually made it to screen. So they were doing this initial test where they were pitching the ideas for different designs for Thunderbird 1, 2, 3, and 4. I did Thunderbird 1. And we had some designs, but we had to kind of then manipulate them to kind of get them into something that looked good in 3D. So it was perfect. It was like my car design kind of sensibilities came in like superbly at that point, and plus coupled with my sci-fi love as well, it was just serendipity. It was just the perfect kind of
manna from heaven, absolutely. And how long were you at Cinesight for?
So I was at Cinesight for about just over 5 years, which was great because it really gave me a good period of time to kind of learn about the industry and learn about other jobs in the industry as well. So even though I started in 3D, there were a few times where we had a little bit of downtime between projects, and they had a fantastic compositing department. Their 2D department was just brilliant. And so when I had a little bit of downtime, I'd go and hassle the compositors and go, hey, could you teach me how you do what you do? And like, let's share some skills. And it was brilliant because that was really my very first kind of like awareness of how much you could do with the compositing skill set as well as a 3D skill set. So I think when I started at Cinesight, I was very much a 3D artist. By the time I left, I was very much a generalist and could do really anything from like kind of end to end in the pipeline.
And there seems to be a little bit of a sort of theme coming through with what you've been telling me, which is, when you went out to SIGGRAPH, you had your portfolio was right. You'd got everything in the right format. So, the audience in California could watch the VHS in NTSC rather than PAL. And when you were at, Cinesight, you were sort of going off and asking people, can I learn a bit from you? Mm-hmm. And it's, I'll rephrase this question before I ask it of you. I mean, clearly that's helped you enormously in your career, that sort of hunger for knowledge, making sure that you've done the research so that when you're going out to talk to people, you're prepared. How important do you think all that is?
Yeah, I think, I think it's really important for you to do your background first, to really understand what the company, what, if you're applying to a company, understand what that company does, what projects has it done recently, what kind of projects are coming up and how do you think you'd fit into it? I think there's definitely a bit of detective work where you have to kind of like understand about both sides. An interview, when you're interviewed for a job, it is an interview for both sides. I think that's what you don't realize when you're younger and maybe having your first round of interviews, you always think it's just about you. And actually, it's about both sides. It's about the company working out whether you fit, but you've got to work out whether the company's a good fit for you as well. So that's always really important. But I think also, one of the interesting things about doing that research is it comes from a place of probably nervousness about myself. So having a little bit of kind of doubt, having a little bit of imposter syndrome. I think I've suffered quite heavily from imposter syndrome throughout my entire career. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I suddenly it suddenly clicked in that the whole kind of imposter syndrome and the whole kind of self-doubt about your artwork and whether you've got enough skills or whether you should be competing at a different level, you flip it on its head. And actually what it is it's a really great way of pushing you to kind of learn more. And so every project I do, I mean, even to this day, every project, you look at it at the end and you're like, I can kind of only see the things I want to change. And you're like, oh, if I had like 2 more days, I could just change these 2 shots and tweak them slightly and they would be so much better. And really, that's not possible. But what it does is it drives you into the next project to go, do you know what? All those mistakes I made on the last project, which no one found out about because they weren't really mistakes. But, all of those things I can do better next time if I just learn a bit more and try to kind of like fix some of those things that were problems before. And actually that imposter syndrome then becomes your kind of superpower, and it really helps you learn, helps drive you forward. I think you just have to try and reframe it in your brain, in that sense. And then it can really kind of like do great things.
Amazing. Wow. So you were at Cinesight, I think, for about 5 years, and then you went on to Rushes, and you were at Rushes for almost 11 years. What was the, what drove you over to Rushes?
So, Jonathan, who had employed me at Cinesight, he actually moved over first, and he was like, I really, really could do with, another pair of hands. Rushes was quite a small company. It had like a very, very good reputation for doing kind of telecine grades, and had a really great Inferno department, but they didn't really do that much kind of 3D work. And also as well, we were coming from doing quite high end film and TV work. And I think we wanted to see if we could bring some of the smaller jobs to a company like Rushes and do them ourselves. And so I think there's always something quite interesting about having a small team. There's definitely a different dynamic when you're in a small company to when you're in a really large company. Large companies can do amazing things and they can do thousands of shots. But I think when you're learning and when you're really kind of like growing as an artist, I think small teams actually can sometimes, it's terrifying. There's fewer places to hide. You can't hide a mistake. A mistake is very visible to everybody. But conversely, you can really shine. You can really kind of like take control of like the whole process and really, really push into kind of new areas, not only of creativity, but into new areas of business as well.
Sure. And when you finished at Rushes, you were doing front-end development. Is that what you went in to do, or did you sort of grow into front-end development?
So when we were at Rushes, we kind of, we started off just really as a 3D department, servicing kind of like advertisements and things like, and things like that, which was the mainstay of Rushes' business. And then by the end, we didn't grow into a huge size, but I'd say we probably had at our peak around like 30 people. And then we were doing lots and lots of TV shows. So TV shows were our main kind of like core business. So, I did a few really big documentaries for Discovery and the BBC. And then we would do lots and lots of dramas. My one claim to fame is I built the lizard for Death in Paradise.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, Harry the Lizard, it still ranks up there. I've got I've got Baby Yoda now, which is slightly higher, but Harry the Lizard still has a place in my heart.
Sure.
Yeah. And it was, and so working on shows like that, really, it was a really great kind of like wide variety of work. And then we also started, getting work in from Double Negative. Mm-hmm. So DNEG, just needed a few extra kind of seats of compositing. So we took on some work for them, and that really helped us push our kind of like creativity to the next level as well, because suddenly you're working at a much, much higher kind of creative, output. And so we were doing small bits on films and then whole TV shows and documentaries, and that was our mainstay. But yeah, I think our last show was Les Miserables, which again, DNEG had, given us a few shots to work on. And while we were working on it, the VFX supervisor had said, I think DNEG are looking to start a TV, side of their business. And we were like, oh my God, is that the end of us? If DNEG, right, this like amazing creative company, are going to come into TV, maybe that's going to nudge us out. And so Jonathan, Louise and myself, we all kind of like, talked to DNEG and said, oh, hey, how about you hire us? Because we know TV and we know how to do it. And, maybe we could help you start up. And that was it. And that was where DNEG TV kind of was formed.
That's quite ballsy, because when I was sort of reading through your CV and, saw that you were, co-founder of DNEG TV, well, that's a very different career course, and going from, in my mind, I suppose, a regular job to starting up a brand new department inside another company, which was risky, but it sounds like you just went and grabbed it with both hands.
I think we kind of all knew we were ready. I think 11 years at Rush's, even though it was fantastic. It was a really, really wonderful company filled with lots and lots of really talented people. I think we knew we knew we could do more. And I think DNEG definitely gave us the kind of opportunity to kind of really, really expand. But there's nothing like going from your nice team of like 40 people who all personally. And then I think there was a time in the first week where we were sitting in a room, just the three of us, going, oh my God, what have we done?
Will they still have us back?
Yeah, it's like have we made the right choice? Is this all going to end like horribly wrong? Have we bitten off more than we can chew? And yeah, I mean, and DNEG was great. We started from really like I say, there were three of us, and then the week later another 4 people joined, and then by the end of it, like 5 years later, we had 250 people. We'd open up a LA office. We had people working on TV all around the world. And, we just worked on, the Black Mirror that won the BAFTA. So the Metalhead episode, which was a fantastic one to do. We'd won some like amazing shows, some really, really big kind of like pieces, which were super creative. And we'd worked with we'd built up this really creative team of, just wonderful artists, producers, and, creative and support staff who really, really just allowed us to do some like beautiful and amazing work.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberry Consulting. Liberry offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at liberryconsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
And you often, as we've been chatting, you've been talking about how great the people are and, support staff and the artists. And, you mentioned people like Jonathan, who you've worked with several times throughout your career. I mean, as I've chatted to people on these podcasts, a recurring theme is so much of it is about the people. Would you agree?
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's the one thing that no one teaches you is that actually all of your skills, all your creativity, really the most important thing you can do is listen, bond teams together, work with people, and really understand how to kind of like be empathetic to how people want to work, and whether that's how a client wants to work, or whether that's how your art team wants to work. You really, really have to enjoy working with people. I mean, I think filmmaking is probably one of the most collaborative skill sets on the planet. You have to, when you land on a film set, it's really obvious that it's not just you. You are just like this one slither. It's not even the director. It's a massive team across art departments and production design and lighting and camera. And I think the interesting thing is with visual effects is actually you have to talk to all of them. You're intrinsic to the solution, to having all of those departments talking to you, and then you working out the best way forwards for everybody, and working it through together, because sometimes what you want to do may actually not be applicable for another department, and then having that kind of, working out how to get around those kind of, problems and really, really kind of, deliver the best possible solution for the show.
And that's, I would imagine, is much easier when you're working with a team of, 20 or 30. But you just mentioned, fairly shortly, in a short time with DNEG TV, there were 250 people in London and LA. How do you, I suppose, sort of scale up that personal communication and connection from 30 people to 250 people?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think there is a sweet spot. I think when you kind of like, when you deal with it on a very personal level, I think there is a sweet spot of around about, once you hit about 150, you start forgetting, or you start kind of like not knowing absolutely everybody by name. And so yeah, there is definitely a sweet spot if you want to kind of do it that way. But I think, it's something about your demeanor, about being approachable, about understanding, about listening to people. I think, when I'm kind of like, when I'm running a dailies, I'm there to steer the team. I'm there to kind of keep them on track, but I'm not there to kind of stifle ideas. What I want to do is to create a kind of like a collaborative environment where people at any level or any job, I'm really super happy. Like if somebody in production has spotted something and really has a great idea, you want the best ideas to bubble up and make it on the screen. And I think creating a kind of collaborative environment, creating somewhere where people feel comfortable to say their ideas, and then also as well giving everyone due credit. I think one of the things that's always lovely is when somebody's come up with an idea and they might not be able to, they might not have the opportunity to kind of like give their idea directly to a director. But I can kind of give their idea to a director, but then I can also call them out and go, and this is, this person's idea, and aren't they fantastic? What a cracking idea. And the director can go, that's amazing. And then they'll feel emboldened, and they'll feel like, well, maybe next time I can say something more, and my ideas are worth something. And I think if you can create that feel and that level of collaboration, I think that's where the magic really, really happens. And that's where, people really feel like they're part of a creative team.
Sure. And those kind of things, I don't think can be taught. One of the things I find fascinating about the sort of the animation VFX and the entertainment industry in general is a lot of people start at the bottom. they come in at a fairly, sort of low level thing, an apprenticeship kind of role, and they start to go up through the ranks and they learn and they're hungry to learn. And if they're lucky enough, they'll have people who mentor them. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in quite a senior managerial role where there is an element of HR and encouragement. But no one's ever taught them how to do it. No one's ever given them the tools to do it. And is that something else that you try and do as you sort of go through your career, as you bring people up with you, is try and, I don't know, sort of mentor them in terms of delivering exactly what you've just described?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you can do is obviously the most important one is leading by example. It's like, if you want people to learn off you, then be that person that can see, and you're very visibly doing it. But absolutely, I think whenever I work with anyone, there's kind of as much as there possibly can be an open door policy of like, hey, do you know what? If you're worried about something, or if you're not sure how to deal with something, please do shout. Just let me know, or we'll grab a coffee and we'll talk through. And I'm again my complex will kick in and go, well, I probably don't have the solution, but we can chat through it, and I could probably let you know what I do, and and then we can kind of see where the problem might lie. But I think being able to bring people on and being able to see people grow as they go through the industry is one of the really, really amazing things that you get to do in visual effects. And it's really wonderful. I mean, I've got friends who, we gave first jobs out of college to, who are now up for Oscars. We had like one last year who had like 2 Oscar nominations. It was like amazing. And, you really do kind of go, that's fantastic. They've done brilliantly, and it's a real honor to have somehow contributed to their career at some point, let alone seeing them doing amazing things.
You're genuinely pleased, aren't you, when something
yeah. I mean, I don't have kids. They're my kids. Like, it's like, it's, you see them go through, and it's like, oh, that's so good.
That's brilliant. Now, you were at Teenage TV, I think, for about 6 years, and then another big shift to the company that you currently work for, Industrial Light and Magic. And I think you moved across to launch their episodic portfolio. Why was that an attractive position to you?
I think one of the interesting things with Industrial Light and Magic was so iconic. If you'd have asked me when I was a teenager, name a visual effects company, the only visual effects company I think I probably would have been able to have named was Industrial Light and Magic, and that was simply because of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the iconic films that they've worked on. But yeah, so there was that definite, oh my god, ILM are calling. How can you say no? There's a little bit of you going like, well, surely I can't say no at this point. But also as well, I think they were really, really interesting to talk to, where they knew that they wanted to do more episodic work. They knew that the kind of the flow of an episodic visual effects show is slightly different to the flow of a feature film one, or certainly was at the time. And they really wanted to kind of understand the differences and really kind of set themselves up for success, which, is a very, very ILM thing. They're very, very kind of interested in kind of gaining that knowledge base. And if they're going to do something, they want to do it kind of right and correctly. So I mean, I think we couldn't say no. And I'm so glad. I mean, like, my first day was perfect because they show you a kind of like an orientation video, which was just clips of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and I might have cried. There might have been a small bit of me that was like crying, just going like, "Oh, this is so beautiful," and my teenage version of myself would literally pinch themselves if they were here. But then like the creative director, Ben Morris, he sat me down and went, okay, so, I'm going to show you what you're going to be working on. It's going to be this TV show called The Mandalorian. It's set in Star Wars universe. and this is the character we want you to build. And they showed me like the first image of Baby Yoda, and I just went, you are going to make so much money out of toys, so much money out of toys. And that was amazing. That was the first kind of year and a half. Really drilling into like kind of pushing myself creatively. I think it was interesting landing at Industrial Light and Magic. The level of the artists and the production team were almost like a step up. It was amazing landing there. They were literally some of the best artists in the world that, you know, I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And so it really pushed me creatively. And I think the expectation of the first Star Wars TV show as well, there was a lot of kind of, wow, this has to be as good as the movies, and it really, really has to push it. So it was great. It was a really, really good show to kind of like have as a kickoff point for us.
Yeah. Couldn't be much better for you, could it?
No, not at all.
I think you've been at ILM for 6 years now, and you've, you know, fantastic portfolio of projects under your belt. You know, films like Ultraman Rising, series like The Mandalorian that we've just been talking about, and Lost Ollie. Are there any things that you've been celebrating Baby Yoda, but any other things that you celebrate from this time, and or things that stick out as good or bad that you've learned from?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the best thing that that's happened whilst I've been at ILM is actually the kind of like is finding that kind of working relationship with the director Shannon Tyndall. So Shannon was the writer and showrunner on Lost Ollie, and Steph Drury, my exec producer, who's just been like the absolute kind of like the person who kind of keeps me on track and sane during the whole process. He's like the best exec producer I've ever worked with. He and myself kind of like really kind of nurtured this friendship and creative kind of partnership with Shannon, and we did a test for Lost Ollie. So at the start, Netflix weren't sure how to make it, so we designed a test and we shot it. Steph flew out to LA and shot it in some back garden in the valley at it was the middle of summer. And I think somebody said that the temperature got up to like kind of like 40 odd degrees. I'm so glad I was at 40 on holiday that day, so I couldn't do it. But yeah, so you know, we kind of designed a test, and we got the show greenlit. And so I think there was something really amazing about, you know, feeling like we were part of the team, feeling like we were there with the filmmakers, with the writer, really, really kind of as a kind of like crucial part to kind of help get this thing get greenlit. And of course, as soon as it got greenlit, which was February of 2020, nothing happened in March of 2020. Suddenly we go into COVID lockdown, and then yes, we had to kind of work out how we're going to keep the show going whilst COVID kind of took over the world. But again, to Industrial Light and Magic's, you know, they were fantastic during COVID, and they really, really, really kind of protected the team, protected, you know, everybody, and, you know, really did whatever they could to kind of like get as much work as possible so that we could keep everyone working. And like, oh my God, the support teams actually kind of like turning the business from fully in person in the office to fully remote in a couple of weeks was just awe-inspiring to see. You know, just amazing how quickly people can pivot and just reorder their entire business, you know, in 2 weeks. It's just amazing.
And talking about sort of repurposing and sort of finding different ways to work and innovate, you know, since you started in games, I've clearly seen loads and loads of technological innovations. You know, I suppose the elephant in the room always is AI. You know, it's here, it's growing, it's having a massive impact on the industry. Do you have any sort of vision of where it might be going next?
I don't know. I think AI is a very tricky subject because it's so broad. And I think on one side of it, you've got the kind of machine learning aspects, which, to be honest, we've been using for quite some time. Things like denoisers, which mean that we don't have to render our images quite as long because, they can stay very noisy images and not kind of compute the last pixel, and then a machine learning algorithm will kind of clean that up. So those have been used across all of visual effects for years now. Whereas I think the whole generative AI becomes a much, much trickier thing to kind of navigate. I think what I really hope is that uniqueness, storytelling, and artistry still stay as the core tenets. That AI will hopefully produce tool sets for us to enable us to stay creative and to stay artistic and and to tell great stories. But I think when something becomes easier, it's very, very simple for people to think, oh well, this is just a shortcut. I don't have to think about the story. I don't have to come up with a great character. I'll just write a line into an algorithm that will just generate me a great character. And I think that way lies a kind of blandness that really doesn't really appeal to me as an artist. I think I still want to connect with things that have come out of other people's imaginations.
Sure, and I think that's everybody's hope, isn't it? It's also my hope. You may share it, that the audience don't get subjected to more generic IP stories, characters, etc., and get I don't know, sort of get complacent or get used to it or whatever it is, so that desire for uniqueness begins to sort of wane a little bit.
I think you're right, and I think that's one of the things that drove me to really enjoy feature animation. So working on Ultraman Rising is seeing the kind of level of artistry that goes in at every level. From camera layout to lighting to designing characters and rigging and animation. I mean, it's such a creative endeavor, and I think when you look at the world of feature animation at the moment, I think it's one of the areas where people, they're still mainstream films, but people are willing to take risk on story and people are willing to take risk on style. If Spider-Verse and Wild Robot, and to a less, to an extent, Ultraman Rising as well, has shown us is that people are willing to accept styles that they haven't seen before. And I think that's really, really important to keep pushing and keep inventing and keep trying new things. And rather than regenerating new things from everything that's been, you're actually just pushing the boundaries. I think that's really important. I think that's where my love of animation and my love of feature animation really, really kind of pushes forward to.
That's all, inspiring stuff. Are you able to say what's next out of ILM, or is that all hush hush?
I can't say what's next out of ILM, but I can say that we're continuing with feature animation. So there'll be a very heavy animation kind of element to it, no matter what happens next.
So a corporate spokesperson, brilliant.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've signed an NDA, and an ILM stormtroopers come in through the window, and Darth Vader turns up at your door if you break it.
It's not worth it, trust me.
It's not at all.
Now, looking back as we've been chatting and hearing about your career, would you say you've had a traditional career path?
I don't know. I don't know what a traditional career path was in those days. No. So I think certainly now it's very much not a traditional career path. I think no one had a traditional career path. Everyone came into the industry at that point in the kind of late 90s from all sorts of different avenues. I mean, it was interesting. I came from industrial design. There were car designers. There were traditional animators. We had one guy who was a forklift truck driver. And he just retrained one day and just decided that he'd had enough of doing that and retrained. And in those days, there were lots of different ways in. I think now it's a much more established industry. There's much more established kind of university courses and kind of short courses that can help. And also as well, there's just a wealth of information on the internet. You know, if you wanted to learn visual effects, you can grab yourself a copy of Blender, you can watch YouTube, you know, tutorials, and really you can do amazing things. And so, you know, it's a much more democratized industry now than I think it used to be. I think it used to be a little bit of luck, a little bit of skill, and keeping your fingers crossed, and that's what got you into the industry.
So, I mean, would you advise somebody now to try and get into the industry?
Yeah, I definitely would. I think it's still a really interesting and vibrant industry to be in. I think it will be interesting to see what AI does to the industry and how much it kind of changes the way that jobs are within it. I think certain jobs, and certainly maybe entry level jobs, will be very, very severely affected. So it might be in the future that getting into the industry is really jumping into that kind of like, you know, lower middle tier of artists, rather than kind of like doing your days doing rotoscope and very, very basic comps. So it'll be interesting to see how it changes. But I think like I mentioned before, it's such a collaborative industry. It's so creative, and you can forge such great friendships. You can kind of forge such great creative relationships as well, that actually, you know, it's very hard to think of another industry where you get that level of creative freedom and that level of collaboration. And, you know, and all the other things as well. Potential for travel. We've both been to LA recently. You know, you get this kind of like amazing ability to travel. I was at the Visual Effects Society Awards and meeting friends who, you know, I used to work with in London, have now moved to New Zealand and, you know, San Francisco and all, you know, Canada and all over. It's a really, really interesting job and a really interesting industry to be in.
No, I agree entirely. I've got one last question before we finish up. Now you mentioned obviously your love of Japan and everything else. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Well, you see, my Welsh heritage means that legally I have to choose a Tom Jones track. So literally anything from Tom Jones, I'll be there. So Green Green Grass of Home, or like Delilah, any Tom Jones track.
And does any of this exist on the internet anymore? Can we tune in?
No, luckily I've only ever done it where no videoing has been allowed. No one wants to hear it, really. You have to be drunk enough to do karaoke for a good reason.
Indeed you do. Hayden, I can't thank you enough for taking time out. I know how busy you are, and to chat to me today, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Oh no, it's been fantastic. And it's been a real pleasure being able to go down memory lane a little bit as well. And hope you've enjoyed it.
A huge thanks to Hayden for giving up his time to talk to Julian on the podcast. I sincerely hope you enjoyed listening. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share, and we'll see you soon for another one. And the show wouldn't happen at all without the wonderful work of Janet Balmforth at Liberia Consulting for her incredible organisational skills, to Julian Scott at Film London for his charm, wit and talent as our host. Find out more about Film London at filmlondon.org.uk. And the edit skills of Odelia Sikinga, who is also an awesome kids development and production executive. Find her on LinkedIn. Thank you all, and see you in the funny pages.